Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second session of our ongoing series of Ask the Broncolor Assistant. My name is Blake Griffin, and I am the product manager here in the U.S. for Broncolor. We have a jam-packed webinar today, so please don't hesitate to answer any or ask any questions here in the chat. We're happy to get those answered for you, but we definitely are going to need to roll if we are going to try to make it through this webinar in one piece. If you do ask any questions and we don't happen to get those answered, don't fret. Please reach out to us on social media at Broncolor USA on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Galvin Collins, the Broncolor assistant. Galvin is a photographer and cinematographer working in Portland, Oregon, and he spent over the last 10 years splitting his time as a stills assistant and a first assistant camera. As a stills assistant, he's helped bring photographers' visions to life, and as a first AC, he's helped keep the picture sharp. So without further ado, Galvin Collins, everybody.
Hey everybody, and welcome. As Blake said, we've got a full webinar today and looking forward to doing this. As he said, any questions or comments or anything like that, throw them in the chat. We will get to them. We're just going to dive right on in here and get going. Today, we're going to be working with a Scoro 1600 jewel pack, and we are going to go over everything. The Scoro Pack is an incredibly feature-rich pack, but that doesn't mean it's complex. So right now we're going to jump right in, get one set up to shoot. All right, I've got this Scoro 1600 jewel pack that we're going to set up right here. I've got my power cord. And first off, we're going to plug into power. The Scoro Pack can be run on 120 volts or 240 volts. If you do 240 volts, you'll need a more powerful modeling light. The benefit of using 240 volts is that you will have a faster recycling time. Since we're in my garage, we're going to be using a 120 volt power just to do this demo. On top here, we've got our power plug-in spot. I've got my power cable, so we're going to just go right in there. And then we're going to plug right into my household power. And then we are set with power. Let's see. So at this point, we're going to be able to plug in a head and get going. I've got pre-set up a Pulso G head here, also a 1600 jewel head. And the connector for the Broncolor has a right way to do it. There is a tab on the very, very tip, and then there's a tab on the very, very back. What we're going to do is on our lamp output channel, we're going to dive in with that very front far tip closest to the handle and dive in and lock that in. There's a little silver tab back here that holds that in there. So to remove the head, you'll pull that tab back and lift up. So once again, very quick, nose in, dive in, locked and ready to go. Our big first step one here is using we got a power rocker here, 0 off, 1 on. And now our pack is powered up. When I get one of these from either rental or working in a studio or a personal one, the very, very, very first thing that I do when I'm using this pack is to reset it to factory defaults. So we have a reset key here. The reset key has 2 levels of reset. When I hold this for 2 seconds, you will hear a beep. And that is just a menu reset, a settings reset. To go to factory, we're going to hold down the reset key for 10 seconds. Holding it. There's our first 2-second menu reset. And there is our factory reset. I do this on every pack because sometimes there'll be settings that are deep in the menu that are locked in, and you want to just start fresh. When you're starting a new shoot, start fresh. You don't want to have anything that you didn't intentionally set into the pack. So a factory reset gets us there. Next up, the big step 2 is auxiliary backup. We're going to jump into the menu here, and we're going to go down to auxiliary backup. Auxiliary backup is Broncolor's term for its internal memory. We're going to navigate to auxiliary backup, and then we selected it. Now we're going to select on. When you set your features into the pack, you always have to hit select, and you will know what you are on up here. It says the function that you're doing and the setting you have selected. So right now it is set to on. Auxiliary backup is the internal memory of the pack, meaning that when you shut this pack off, the settings will be saved if the memory is on. If you turn it back on, whatever we've done will still be on there. So I don't understand why it's not default on, but the first thing we do after we've reset it is turn the auxiliary back up on. That way, when we go to lunch and we shut all our packs off to cool down the set a little bit, when you turn them back on, all those settings will be saved in here. Auxiliary backup, that is your big step 2 after reset, is turning that on. Just so you know,
hey,
that
Galvin,
you have
we have a question from the audience, actually.
Yes.
I know you kind of briefly mentioned it, but can this pack be plugged into a 220-volt washer-dryer port in a U.S. home for faster recycling time? And is there a special plug that can be purchased to make that happen?
Yes to all of that. Yes, you can run it on industrial 220 up to 240 volts. You do have to have the right power cable or the right connectors for that. And then the modeling lamp that's in there standard is set for 120 house. So you'll have to get the higher wattage modeling lamp bulb. Oh, I guess I should do that. The higher wattage modeling lamp globe so that you don't burn that out while using a higher power. And you do get faster recycling time when you do use, the industrial or high voltage connectors.
And if you're interested in making that purchase, please reach out to the Broncolor dealer of your choice, and they would be happy to make sure you get the right parts.
Absolutely. Moving right along here, we've got, now that we've got a head plugged in, we've reset the pack, and we have turned our auxiliary back up on. We're ready to work. And thank you for the question. Any and all questions are great. Let me know in the chat if there is anything specific that you want me to cover down the road a little bit here. Now that we are all set up, we're going to go over what I call the anatomy of the pack. Just an overview of what everything is here so you know what is going on. We are set up here to the top of the pack. I've already mentioned we've got our power rocker here, 0 off, 1 on. The next thing that I want to talk about is the handle. The Scoro S has a blue handle, the Scoro E has a black handle, but this is not just for carrying your pack around. Built in here is the antenna for the RFS 2.2 system. It's good to know that so that if you, by chance, you're having any connection issues, interference, you can just visually inspect and make sure that the area around it is clear and able to accept those radio frequency signals. Next up here, we've got our 3 lamp outlet ports. On the Scoro S, there's 3, and on the Scoro E, there is 2. This is where you plug in up to 3 heads, and that's, as we talked about, nose in, dive down, lock it in, you're good to go. Corresponding directly to 1 through 3 lamp ports, we have our lamp channel keys, or our lamp keys. These are where you can you can turn on or off each light on here. So if you've got 3 lights plugged in, but you only want 2 to fire, or you only want 1 to fire, you're testing each individual light, say metering with your meters. This is where you can press these and turn that channel off. You don't have to unplug the light. You don't have to make any changes. You just push your channel keys there. Next up, right next to those, are our power selectors. These up and down buttons adjust the power output for the individual channels. Each head can adjust in 1/10 stop incrementation by single pressing. So if I just push once, single pressing will get you 10th incrementation. You can do a long press, and it'll take it down 1 full stop or 10/10ths. And then you can hold it down, and it will bounce between stops quite quickly. So if you need to get a lot of power fast, that's the way to do it. Next up, we've got an LCD display for each channel. This is where you know how much power is going to your lamp output that corresponds to that channel, 1, 2, and 3. And there's 1, 2, and 3. Each channel has all of its information, so you can keep everything separate. Very clear, easy. You know what you're getting. You know what you're doing. Next up here, we've got our master power. We've got looks like another channel, but this is the incrementation for adjusting your power on a global setting. We've got our connector. This is the total output of power in the pack. So it is the accumulative power of all of your channels. On a 1600 joule pack, 10 would represent your 1600 joules. Let me turn that off there. Same deal with the buttons, 10th stop incrementation, hold it down a little bit for your full stop jumping. The important thing to know about this is if you have good ratios in between, say, 3 lights, you like the power settings in between all of them, this is where you will up and down just to adjust those evenly across. So it will average out the power settings and maintain your ratios between each light. That's a good note there on that one. Talked about that. All right. So moving over here, there's multiple ways to trigger a Scoro pack. You can use cell, infrared, RF, or a sync port. Right off the bat, we've got our cell button here. If we want to fire this optically, so you fire another strobe, and you want this to fire when it sees that light, you will have your cell on. This little square here is the optical receiver for both infrared and for cell. If they're not firing when they see another flash, the first thing to do is make sure that this is exposed, clear, nothing blocking it. There is also a menu setting that we'll talk about in a little bit about the sensitivity of that cell feature right there. A little pro tip with cell, if you're using multiple Scoro packs on a larger set, so you've got 4 packs, you've got 2 lighting a background, 2 lighting a subject, and multiple lights, and you're triggering with IR, RFS, or something else that syncs in here. What you can do is after you've established all your ratios and everything that you want, you can turn the cell on, and I find that as a extra level of insurance that all the packs will fire all the time. With any syncing system, occasionally, 1 out of 30 shots, 1 pack might not fire, something like, especially if you're running high powers or the recycle is set differently. Sometimes you can get 1 pack in a set of 4 that doesn't fire occasionally. And if you turn the cell on, what you're doing is if 1 of those 4 packs fires, the cell will see it and make sure that all the packs trigger. And it won't overlap or double pop. It will just fire the 1 time. So that's just an added level of insurance. Also why you can have 2 different triggering systems set up on the top there. Next up here, we've got our infrared or RFS triggering button. This is if we're using our infrared remote, Broncolor's infrared system, or the RFS 2.2 system. This is where you will select to be using that as your trigger. There's also some menu settings in here we'll cover when we get into the deep menu dive. Next up, we've got our modeling light. This turns on and off our modeling light, as you can see behind me. Modeling light on and off. One note, if you turn this on and nothing happens at the head, the Pulso head, the Unilight, the Pico, most heads from Broncolor have a kill switch at the head. Sometimes it'll trip you up if you're sitting there and you hit your modeling light and nothing happens. It's just good to know. Also, if you're putting these high up, I like to make sure they're on. Again, 0 is off, 1 is on with the switches and tabs. But I like to make sure that's on when I put the head up high, so that way I don't have to bring it down to check it. And that way also you don't think you have a bad modeling light globe. There's a few extra features in the menu about the modeling light. We'll cover that down the road when we get into the menus. Next up is our test key. This is a very important and a great little tool. The test ready indicator. If you want to test fire the pack, like if I wanted to fire it right now, I just push this button and boom, it fires. This button also, the light on it, it glows blue LED when the pack is ready to fire. It will be dark if it is recycling or recharging. If we go down in power here real quick, you'll see that that went off. What it's doing is, since we reduce the power going to the head, it takes that charge, reduces it, and cycles it back into the pack. Takes a second, but once it has done that, the test set button comes back to blue. This is also...
Galvin, can we possibly turn on picture-in-picture? So let's see that in action if we can.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Absolutely. Perfect. Here we go. All right. Picture-in-picture is up. So if we are going to hit the test button, and I hope the frame rates on the camera will work on this, but pushing the button will fire the pack. And then if we go up in power, it can go up in power really fast. It's when we go down in power that right now it's cycling that power that we pulled out of the head down into the pack. Now it's ready to fire. This button will also... oh, yes. Yes.
Sorry, whoops, sorry. And Mona in the chat is asking, does the pack need to be powered on in order to use the modeling light?
Yes, it does. If there is no power, like if you have the master power off, it will not send power to the heads. Which is also a good thing because as a photo assistant, you get asked to put on different modifiers or change things. And when you have, like it will not, even if you power this down now, I cannot test button this, so it cannot fire. Which again, for a photo assistant, I'll be asked to maybe change a modifier on a light. I go to the light and I'm changing that modifier. What I don't want is the photographer to be able to pop that strobe in my face while I'm doing that work. So it's good practice for me. I turn the pack off and that way it will not fire. It does not have a charge going to it. And I don't have that light potential of stinging your eyes. I had that happen once and I learned to always turn the pack off. You see in black and white when you burn out your rods and cones for about 24 hours, but that's a different story. All right, back to the test key here. If the pack should encounter a fault, what would a fault be? A problem with the electrical system. If your flash tube is dying, as the flash tubes get to the end of their life, it can cause a fault in the pack. This test light will turn red. If for some reason it is a lamp head that it thinks that a flash tube is going bad in, it will make the power indicator on that channel blink. So if this goes red and you've got a blinking channel here, that means that you've got a fault in a potential bad flash tube. If you don't have that flash and you've got red, there's a good chance that you want to be working on a grounded power system. You want to make sure your extension cables have ground in them. You want to have your outlets be grounded. It's very important to be working with a good electrical system. I know when you go and do location work, sometimes you don't have control over that, but if you have a bad ground and it cannot cycle that power back out, you can get a fault in the pack. It's also good just for ensuring the safety of the equipment and the people working that we use grounded outlets. It's pretty darn important. All right, next up on our tour of the top here, we've got our speed key. This is one of the big ones. Selecting this button optimizes the pack for flash duration T.01 and recycle time. It reduces the time in between shots and optimizes the pack for the fastest duration for stop action photography. It doesn't adjust it to its absolute fastest, but it makes the pack ready and puts it in optimal for doing rapid fire and flash duration work. When you do go into the speed key, the total power output of the pack is reduced from 1600 joules to 1200 joules. And alternatively, the 3200 watt pack has its own reduction as well. So that's just good to know that when you do go into speed mode, you're working to be rapid fire, you lose a little bit of power when you're doing that. User key. Right here, we've got a user key. The easiest way that I have figured out to know how this works is there is two users. You can have two independent users while using this pack. User 1 means the user key is off, like there's no light to it. And then user 2 is when you have it selected. As you can see, it brought up when I went to user 2, it went into our memory settings, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So each user has 4 memory slots to save what I would call setups, shot scenarios, or lighting situations. So you say you are dialed in for having 3 lights on the pack, you are using a minimum flash duration, and you want to be able to recall those settings. You can save them into a memory slot. And between the two users having 4 channels per user, you have a total of 8 slots in here that you can save settings that you can recall later. That is user reset. We've already talked about that. Hold it down for 2 seconds. We'll reset any menu items that you have built in. And 10 seconds will take you to a factory reset. If you are syncing with another remote system outside of the Broncolor RFS, IR, or using another flash like a cell, this is your sync port here for plugging in an 1/8" mini cable for syncing. The COM port here is for connecting to a computer. There's a couple of good features that you can take advantage of there. I haven't used it much on set, but that sync port, I have a bunch. All right, so the Scoro Pack has has 4 standout features that make this incredible, make it a very powerful tool, a very powerful creative tool. And we're going to go over those 4 key features. So first up, we've got delays. Delays is creating streaking action by precisely dialing in the flash to capture the moment at the right time. So the feature adds the feature as it is named, it delays the flash from the time you trigger it to when you want it to fire. For example, if you intentionally want to create a streaking blur behind a moving subject, use this tool to achieve that effect. So we want picture in picture. There we go. So to create a blur, we'd use a longer shutter speed. We can just say something like 1/30th of a second. Under normal settings, if we were to just shoot the photo in standard settings, 1/30th of a second, that flash is going to fire right away. Then your shutter will stay open for your 1/30th of a second. If you're doing linear motion, say somebody running left to right, what that's going to do is it's going to create a freezed action on one side, and the blur is going to happen in front of the subject. So what we want to do is we want to dial when that flash happens within that 1/30th of a second so that we can capture the blur that we want and then stop the action with the flash. And that's what the delay can help you with. The nice thing about the delay is you can set it up anytime. So if you're working with consistent actions, you can adjust that to capture the best amount of blur and action built in there. Where we find this, we jump into our menu. We are going to go to delay, which you can see right here. We're going to hit our select button. Right now it is set to off. You can see off is in there. We've got a plus or minus button here. And in our example, we set 1/30th of a second, but just for demonstration purposes, we're going to take it up to a 1/2 second delay. It's good for a visual. Again, we've made a selection. We are where we want. We're going to hit select. You can see that now changes to what we have just selected. I like to back out of the menus to the home screen when I do that. Now, when we test this, there is a 1/2 second delay. Push button, fire. This has a wide range. You can go from 0.25 of a second all the way up to 50 seconds worth of delay. I think it's 0.01, adjusted from 0.01 seconds all the way up to 50 seconds long. So if you are doing some long exposure work, you can go all the way up to 50 seconds with that delay. It's, again, a really powerful tool. If you're just doing that blur is one way to be creative. If you've got another way you think that this could help you, shoot it into the comments and into the chat. We'd be happy to hear and be interested in seeing what you think you could do with a delay built into it. All right, so we're going to jump to next one up is the sequence feature. First off, I'm going to go to my menu. We're actually going to use the reset 2 seconds. And that just cleared out the delay that we put in there. So we're back to kind of a core position. Sequence feature, also known as the multi-pop feature, will fire the strobe a predetermined number of times with one trigger. So right now I push this once, it flashes once. With sequence, I push that once, it'll fire as many times as we have programmed in there to fire. It can allow you to track action in a photo, which I have a diagram. Here, you can see this photo was shot using the sequence feature. Multiple pops. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pops that they've used to capture this action and tell that story of motion by taking multiple exposure or multiple pops, not exposures, but in one exposure, firing the flash multiple times. A very handy tool and very creative tool to show action as it's happening. All right, so to talk about this, we're going to jump into the menu and we are going to go to sequence, select. Again, we're in this menu. It's set to off. We can go, we're going to build in, since we saw that picture had 5 or 6, let's just do 6 strobes. Again, we're going to hit our select button to lock in that feature. We can see there it is set to 6. We're going to quit and go back out to the main menu. Now when I fire this, and I hope the camera can see some of these pops, but you will hear it. So we'll get close with the microphone. That was 6 shots fired rapidly. We'll do it one more time. There we go. So in its core settings, when you program in 6 pops like that, what it is going to do, it is going to fire them at its fastest available. Geez, a fly just hit me in the face. The fastest available settings. So the interval in between those shots is the shortest amount the pack can handle. As you can see, that was very, 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 very fast. So unless you're trying to capture an action that is very, 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 very fast, you're going to want to dial in an interval in sequence with the sequence. There we go. So we're going to jump down to...
Galvin, we have a couple of questions here that are coming up as well that we can kind of talk about. Let's jump back a second to delay. Andrea in the chat says, could the delay be used in a dark room for sound or laser trigger when looking at splashes and pours?
Well, if you're using a sound or laser trigger, you're using that sound or a broken laser to fire the camera. What the delay can do for you is, if you know that when that sound or laser trigger goes, that action that you are trying to capture happens at a different moment from when that trigger fires the camera, then yes. So if you know that, say you've got somebody shooting an arrow through a frame and you're using a laser trigger, when that goes through here, and say you're using your laser ahead of where it's supposed to be just because you want to make sure your camera captures it, you're using a little bit more of a shutter, and that arrow breaks that laser, that's going to fire the exposure right there. But say you want your arrow further in and you want your strobe to hit here, you can add in that millisecond display, that 0.25 of a second display delay, so that you can dial in when that strobe fires to stop that action. And that's the brilliance of that tool, is you have such a wide range of where you can fire the strobe within an open exposure. So yes, you can use that to time accurately when you want your strobe to go off using those triggering options.
Wonderful. And John asks, do each of the individual channels, can you control a sequence with those individually, or is it on a per pack basis?
On a sequence, it's per pack. If I dial in 6 shots, each one of these channels is going to fire the 6 shots, or 6 flashes, sorry. 1 shot, 6 pops. You cannot say this channel is 1, this one has 3, this one has 7, or it's just based on the pack. It's a global pack setting. Which, if you want to do different pops at different times using multiple packs, you could have different heads set up, and that'd be kind of interesting to capture different motions almost at different speeds. You could do something fun like that. I see potential there. I see ideas. It gets the wheels turning. I like that. Thank you for sharing that idea. Anyway, to jump right back in here, to make the sequence last a little bit longer, or to build in a delay in between the shots in the sequence, we're going to use the interval feature. There we're going to select, again, it says off, we're going to use our arrows, and I'm going to add, again, just for the dramatic nature of it, we'll just do 0.610 second. We're going to say select. We always hit select, locks it in. We can see right there it is locked in, and we're going to hit quit, and I like to go out to the main menu. Now when I hit this, it's going to fire 6 shots, but there's going to be a 0.62 delay in between them. So let's do that. I don't know how many of those flashes you saw back there, but you could hear them firing. Again, we'll do it one more time just because it's cool. I like it. Sequence is a lot of fun. I like it for, we've done stuff with martial artists and stuff like that where they're punching a bag and you can see the punch as it goes and then the bag move all in one shot. It's a very interesting way of telling a motion story. Again, if you got any cool ideas with it that aren't the basic example that we're using, go ahead, throw them in the chat and get some discussion going, because these features are what make these packs so powerful. Again, let's see. Next up, we're going to talk about free masking. This is also known as ping-ponging, or ping-ponging. It's a really cool feature, and I'm going to talk about it. But we're going to clear the menu options here. Free masking or ping-ponging was originally made and intended to allow you to alternate your shot setups to create a maskable image when you're doing, say, tabletop or product photography. It's also known as shooting for knockout or KO. To utilize this feature, let me bring up my example here. All right, so basically you think of it as creating two lighting scenarios. On the left is you will have one pack set up to light this image. So you're lighting your product or your subject as you want to see the image. And then on another pack with another set of lights, you light the background in a way that you create a silhouette. What this does is when you get into post, you can use the silhouette shot to create a mask in Photoshop to knock out the background and put your subject anywhere you want it to do, where you want it to be, which is very powerful for using, for product photography. Takes a few seconds to set up on set, but saves you a lot of time in post. There we go. To do free masking, we're going to jump into our menu and we're going to go down to our free mask. All right, select. So in free mask, you'll see number of units. Free mask, the example that we did just uses two packs with two independent lighting scenarios, one for your subject and how you want the image to look, and one creating a backlit silhouette that you can use as a mask, as we said, in post. You can use up to 4 packs firing independently. So you would take one shot, it would fire one pack. You take a second shot, it would fire a second pack. You take a third shot, it would fire a third pack. So you can do this all the way up to 4 packs. Again, a lot of creative opportunities there, but for the example that we were just talking about of shooting 2 shots of a product, we're going to set it up for that. So right now, number of units, select. And we're going to say 2 for free masking. As you can see, they call anything above 2 alternating because it alternates between the packs. But for 2, we're just doing free masking. So we're going to select that. As you can see, it locked that in. We can back out. And now, so I'm just using 1 pack here. We're going to imagine that we've got a second pack set up. For our first pack, we want to set up the status. We want each pack to know where it stands in the order. So we're going to hit select. And we have 3 options here: off, active, and wait. Active, when you select that, this pack will fire on the next shot. So if I were to right now say hit the test, or I said active, I selected it. If I'm going to fire this, that means it fires. Then say I take my second shot, the pack didn't fire there. Fired on that one. So essentially the pack fires every other. So once you have your first pack set up as your active, you want your second pack to be set up as wait. So that's where you would set it up as wait. You will hit select. Now this pack is set up to wait. So now if I hit the test button, it doesn't fire. It does on the second shot. So it creates an alternation. If we jump in, or we jump back out to number of units and say that we select 4, we're going to have 4 packs that all independently fire on each of 1 through 4 shots. We're going to select that, and then we're going to go to our status. You now see we have active, going to fire next. Wait 1, that'll fire on the second shot. Wait 2, fire on the third shot. And wait 3, fire on the fourth shot. So you can set up your sequence of 4. Pretty helpful. pretty awesome. We're going to back out of there. I've got kind of a pro tip of a second option for how to do this. If you're doing rapid fire sports action photography, this pack is already capable with the speed key of shooting at full power, 10 frames per second of an action with a very fast recycle time. But a lot of cameras, like sports action cameras, can do up to 20 frames per second or somewhere in between there. And what you can do is set up that free mask to bounce between two packs. So alternate each shot next to next to next. And it'll allow the recycle time for each pack, and you can rapid fire much, much faster. So you can use free masking as a tool for increasing your shot count while shooting sports action, which is a pretty cool feature. You'll have two heads generally, and you'll want to rig those up into one modifier, or if you don't mind, if each individual shot has slightly different lighting, you can have two different heads. Broncolor also has bi-tube heads, which have two flash tubes in one head with two cables coming out. So you can have one instrument in a light. It's the same lighting each time, and they plug into two different packs. So you can do that free masking, alternating, and get that extra frames per second out of it. Kind of a cool use case there. If you can think of anything unique or different using that, again, throw it in the comments. We love to hear what people think they can use this for or have. Some of you may have used Scoro Packs in the past and have experience and an idea that's different than your standard in the manual idea of using it. Let us know. All right. Oh, I'm going to take a quick sip of water here. We're moving on to the big feature.
And while we're doing that, and while we're rehydrating there, Galvin, we have a question here in the chat. I shoot action stopping the shot for product and dance. Will a Scoro 1600E help me capture such action stopping shot, or do I need to use a 1600S?
For anything sports action, I would always, always, always recommend the S. The feature set has more ability to do that stop action. I think the E is great. It's fantastic for your studio setups. It has a lot of the features, but if you are really focusing on sports action, going with the S line of packs is the way to go. I know it's quite an investment, but one thing I'll talk about in a future webinar is why I love Broncolor and why I used it for 12 years on set. They are tough. They have incredible maintenance records that I almost don't believe they're amazing. They were durable and they last. So, excuse me, the initial investment of getting this will get you so many years, and it is the right tool for shooting sports action. That was a little too salesman-y, I'm sorry, but it is durable, tough, and it does exactly what you want with sports action. And that's actually a great segue into the next feature of the Scoro S pack here, and that is flash duration T.1. So what is T.01? This is the feature that is, like I said, it's the powerhouse of the Scoro Pack. And by utilizing this feature, you can capture incredibly fast actions without any blur. If we talked about how inducing blur with delay and keeping your shutter open, this is the feature that eliminates blur. We do intend on doing a full webinar about this at some point, but this is just a main overview letting you know about this feature and where it is and what it is. On set, we call this duration work or stop action. Broncolor's terminology is T.1. And what is T.1? When working with Scoro Packs, our cameras are pretty much limited to shooting between 160th to 250th of a second shutter speed while sunk to a pack. And as you know, if you're shooting talent that even moves around a little bit while you're working, those sync speeds can sometimes lead to blur, especially just shooting without a strobe. 1/250th of a second is not epically fast and will not stop a high amount of action. So how with a strobe pack do we shoot this type of high action? That's the T.1, which can get you essentially, okay, let's just go back to one. Within that 250th of a second that your maximum camera shutter speed will have, what this pack will do is fire the strobe, which will go up to its max power and return to absolute darkness in a set amount of time within your 1/250th of a second. And that is on this pack can be up to 1/10,000th of a second shutter equivalency. So why is it called T.01? There's a T.01 and T.5 are acceptable standards for rating the flash duration. You'll see that pretty much industry-wide when we are looking at what a power pack is rated to as far as its flash duration. Duration meaning the time that it goes from dark to light to dark again. The T.1 is kind of a number that seems deceptively slow. And it is the preferred note for Broncolor. They prefer to use T.01, and I will get to why that is. You will see a lot of other products rated at T.5, which oftentimes represented seems faster. Let me bring up my little chart here. All right.
Perfect. I was just about to ask if we had a visual showing for
yes,
this here.
I got a visual. Yeah, I was just stumbling my way through trying to get to the chart. All right, this scale measures the point of flash energy, flash energy being power, intensity, or brightness, however you want to think about it, as it's on its way to reaching its maximum in relation to when it returns to that same point of flash energy on the way down to completely off. This measurement takes place in the time when the strobe is triggered, the light intensity reaches. I just double said that. To visually represent this, we have a graph that shows flash energy over time. That's what we're looking at here. It's a bell curve. As you can see, energy is very quick to reach its maximum intensity, but it is slower to taper off to its minimum energy and having no light emitted. Broncolor has what they call the Broncolor strobe cutoff technology, which works very intelligently to reduce the amount of time that it takes to do that, but it still represents in a bell curve with a long tail. And now you can see on the left here, light intensity, you'll see the 10 and the 50 are the two spots that are highlighted in intensity versus on the bottom time. Now what you're seeing is 50 is what is generally referred to as T.5 in rating flash duration. And it's the measurement of time takes place where the light hits 50% on its way up to maximum energy and then comes back down to 50% on its way down. And then for T.1, the measurement starts at 10% of its energy on its way up to maximum and then comes down back to 10% on its way to 0. So that's where that's that longer time frame because of that extra tail of light as it's dimming. I've got another here. So when you are doing these ratings at that point of 10% to, you can see on this graph here, 10% starts earlier on the time frame and then lands roughly similar to the 50%. Sorry, we're talking in graphs and charts, and I'm just a photo assistant here. Anyway, so we've got basically it's not that much longer when you look at the T.01 because of taking into consideration when it starts and when it ends. Got another graph here. Comparing the two standards, as you can see on the graph, measuring the T.05 at the 50% and the T1 at 10%. Basically, what we're doing is generating what is called a flash equivalency. And that's how they represent the numbers for us. And to generate that flash equivalency, the amount of time that it takes for the light to go from off to on to off, rating it at 10 means that we are closer to that full amount of off to on to off. It is a more accurate representation. When you look at the T5, you're not taking into account that slower fall off. And when you are using something that is rated similarly at that, you can still get blur because there's still light being emitted from the globe at that point. That's the long and the short of it. We should get the Broncolor scientists out here to talk about that next time. It's the nuts and bolts. I know how it works, and learning all of the science behind it is that's the tough part, but fun. It is fun. All right, where do we take advantage of the fact that we have a very shutter equivalent, very accurate shutter equivalent, and where do we take advantage of shooting with those durations? We're going to jump into our menu here, and we're going to go to, again, we call shutter call it T01. There we go. Man, I need another sip of water. I'm stumbling, but we're here. All right. Flash duration is represented by Broncolor by using T01 optimal. So what we're going to do is jump into the menu to T.01. We're going to hit select here, and you'll see that right now the pack, as it's set up, will fire optimally at 1/3000th of a second. If we turn on our speed button, which optimizes the pack for shooting in T01, we now jump up to 1/4300th of a second shutter equivalency. And that means the pack is optimally set up to fire at that rate under these settings. If we increase the power, we'll reduce that shutter speed. However, we've got an awesome extra feature here. If we use our arrow key, we can go down to minimum duration, meaning this is the minimum this pack can do. It can squeeze out a faster duration. I'm going to select minimum, which under this power setting of 6.7, we can do 1/4000th of a second shutter speed. And if we reduce the power, that goes up. So let's see, we're just going to go the fastest with one head on the pack. There we go. Okay. Changes. There we go. 5.3. I think it's 6. There we go. We found it. All right. 5.4 on this pack in speed mode will give us 1/10,000th is the maximum power that we can shoot, 1/10,000th of a second shutter equivalency. So again, what that is your camera syncing at 1/250th will be your camera setting. Within that 1/250th, shutter opens. This turns that light from off to on to completely off again in 1/10,000th of a second shutter equivalency. So doing those actions, 1/250th of a second, you're essentially getting 1/10,000th of a second shutter speed while shooting your sports action, which is you can stop incredibly fast motion. If you want to see the incredible stopping factor, get one of these packs, have somebody swing a rope. I know it's a boring shot, but a rope is interesting because at the center, it moves slower than at the end, and you can really get that thing swinging, and that tip will stay very, very sharp. It takes a lot of speed to beat that 1/10,000th of a second. Another note, when you set it to optimal or minimum, as you saw, I was able to adjust the power, and it adjusted the minimum in accordance. The pack will not give you a feature that it cannot perform. So as you make changes to power, it will change the duration that you're getting as you're doing that. When it's set to minimum, it'll always keep it at its fastest available. When you're set to optimal, it'll keep it at the speed that is optimal. In between here, you can set these in, but that will change. It'll keep it at 1/8000th until it can't, and then it'll go to the next one. I like to keep it on minimum if I'm doing sports action, because then you can keep an eye on how much shutter speed and how much power you're pushing. Now, the other thing to note is, say you're using a delay and you want to induce blur. This pack has the ability to go down to the equivalent of 1/185th of a second duration. So it can stretch that duration out as well, which if you want to induce blur, you want to create blur, that is a great way of being able to do that. So it's not just about being fast, it's about having precision tools for anything in there. So if you can think of any cool ideas using either a fast duration or slow duration, jump them into the comments. We can talk about them. It's a great feature, super cool. And like I said, I think it's one of the most powerful features that this pack has to offer.
Yep, and John in the chat says that optimum is for that consistent color temperature, whereas minimum is for your speed.
Yes. Optimum on here will frequently refer to maintaining the most accurate color temperature. I did forget to mention that. I am sorry. We will talk about color temperature here in a second as we jump into other notable features, which we're going to move right on to. Blake, let me know how we're doing on time. We do have some more menu features to go through, and I know we're got a lot of them anyway. All right, so let's jump right in here. So I have some features staved in here. We're going to clear this out just so that we can, and you'll see even on the menu it says optimal color temp. So those optimal features maintain the color temperature. All right, first notable feature outside of those core big ones is going to be our help tab. You'll see right here there's a tab that says help. When we go to any of these things, we can always hit help and it will let us know what that feature is all about. Very handy if you get one of these packs and you don't know what something is, you can learn on the fly. They've given us a great brief description of everything built into the pack, which is super handy. Next thing I'm going to draw attention to is charge time. All right, right here, select charge time. You have two options, slow and fast. I think all the time you should be set to fast, unless you find yourself shooting at a location that does not have a robust power grid. Like we talked about, sometimes you get to a place and you are shooting with, you know, a 15 amp circuit that has a refrigerator plugged into it. And sometimes you'll blow circuits, just trying to keep the packs trying to draw power to recycle faster. If you don't need a fast recycle time, you're shooting a basic editorial portrait, you're in a spot where the power is junk, change that to slow. It'll reduce the draw on the electrical system, and that can sometimes be the difference between being able to get the job done or not. Just knowing that you can do that. But if you are in any place with good power, always have it set to fast. It'll allow you to do a quicker recycle and let you keep moving faster. Next up here, the pack does have an option for an easy mode. And much like cameras with easy modes, it limits what you can see and what you can do with that pack. I don't recommend using it just because we use these packs because they have features. We use these packs because they have bells and whistles. And that's the whole idea of this webinar, is understanding those. But should you find yourself using a pack that you are not finding the features that you know based on what you've seen here, other research that you've done, it might be set in easy mode. And that's also one reason why I always recommend, you know, doing your factory reset when you first pull it out of the case. But should you be in that mode and you want to take it off, or for some reason you'd like to turn it on, holding down the user key for 5 seconds will give you those options. I like to stay out of easy mode. All right, next up, that color temperature adjustment that we were talking about. And this is a very unique feature. This is one that I have not seen it anywhere else on a strobe. So the cool thing is we have the ability to change our color temperature, either cooler by negative in our optimal. Like, we aren't doing duration, we're not in speed mode. We can go 400 degrees Kelvin in the negative, so warming up, or we can go up to 800 Kelvin plus in blue. And this will help you if you've got multiple lights. Flash tubes, as they age, say you get a rental pack, you don't know how many flashes that thing's done. It can minorly start to change the color temperature, and this can give you a way of tuning that so that you can unify multiple lights. So that's pretty handy. I do recommend, though, if you are going to be making these changes by eye can be very difficult while looking in the monitor. So like a color meter is very, very handy to have. It's a fantastic tool for shooting on location, shooting many, many scenarios. So Psychonic makes a really great color meter. All right. And like I said, as you add different settings like your delays, your sequences, your durations, the pack's optimal ability of changing color temperature will change. Again, these sometimes will be limited based on the settings that you have. And again, the pack is smart. It's not going to let you dial in something that you can't have. It's going to let you know where your ability lies in there. So we're going to jump back out here. Next up, we're going to talk about memory. As we talked about with the user button, we have 4 memory slots. And we're just going to navigate down there. Memory, select memory 1. So right now we can see memory 1 has 1 lamp set to 3.3. Its T1 is set to optimal 1/4600th of a second. So in theory, if we wanted to, let's save what we have here in that spot instead. So 5.4, we're going to hit store. We're going to overwrite this data. We're going to say yes. So now in memory 1, we have what we just set up. So we're just going to change that. And you don't have to hit test. That's a kind of an old photo assistant habit. Somebody tells you to make changes, so you make the change and you hit test, so it'll recycle fast into those changes. The pack can absorb that power down. You'll see it again. It takes a second to come to back to ready to fire. That's an old habit that I have. Like you'll say the photographer will be like, "Can you go down a stop?" I'll dial in that and then hit test the pop. The pop lets the photographer know that you've dialed in the setting, and then you confirm it with a verbal response, 1 stop down. So now we just made changes and we want to go back to what the setting that we just saved in memory. We're going to select memory 1. We can see that it has a different power setting, and we're going to hit recall and then recall memory data. Yes. Now we are back to 5.4. All the other settings that we had in there will be saved and reloaded to the pack. 4 per user, so a total of 8 slots between user 1, which is the user button off, and user 2, which is the user button on. All right. Next up, we've got modeling light options. See behind me, I've just turned our modeling light on. We're going to navigate up to our modeling light, which is right there. I think probably most of us are familiar with this, but you've got different options here, proportionate settings of different intensities. You can have it just set to low. You can select and have it on its brightest. You can have your proportionate in low. So as I change my settings here, that will get brighter based on the intensity of the light that you have going to the strobe. It gives you a ballpark proportionate relationship between your lights while you're lighting. Pretty handy there. You've got a lot of options in here. I'm not going to talk too long on that, so we're going to duck back out there. We also have our dim feature, which dimmer, there it is. All right, right now we have dimmer set to on. So with our modeling light on, which you can see behind me, if I fire this, it goes dark and then comes back up. What that's doing is when the light comes back up, it lets you know the pack is recycled and ready to fire again. So it's a visual confirmation of the pack's readiness to take the next shot. You can turn that on or off. You can have it, if it's off, the light will always be on. If the dimmer is on, it will dim to let you know the pack is ready. The pack is faster than the most modeling lights can actually dim, so it's just a loose visual representation. Audible settings. We do have the ability to set up how loud we want our audio ready signal. This is our, you can hear the beep. We can change that to select, be loud. So it gets a little bit louder. We can have it quiet. I'm just going to keep it on medium. We also have different mode options. This is if you've got multiple packs, or let's think of it as a studio. You've got multiple sets in one studio. And one studio, you want to have the audio readiness signal be different than the other studio so that the photographers aren't getting confused by what sound each set is making. You can change the sound based on the address here, which is super handy. Your volume keys, or your keys, which you can hear, make a nice clicky noise as you do that. Good response, lets you know you've hit the button. You can adjust the volume of those as well. So there's so much customization that you can do with this. All right, as we talked about syncing, there's multiple ways to sync the pack. We talked about adding a remote system that you may own that goes 1/8 inch into the sync port. The cell, we do have, which is the optical trigger. We do have some settings here for cell, which is, I bumped right past it. There it is, cell sensitivity. We can adjust how sensitive that is to a flash, either high or low. If you find you got something that's the pack is further away and you're trying to get it to trigger via another strobe, setting this to high and making sure that this little block here is visible to the set so that it can see the flash, that's available there. Then IR and RFS. This is our on-off, and if we jump into flash control here, this is a pretty handy tool. It allows you to, when you have this button on, its native setting is to look for both infrared and RFS. If you find yourself in an environment, since a lot of products in the world use infrared and use RFS, radio frequency signals, to operate on their own, you can be in an environment that has a lot of interference. And that interference can create, some misfires or fire the strobe when you aren't expecting it. To reduce any of that, if you're experiencing it, be specific about which system you're using. If you're using IR, select IR. If you're using RFS, select RFS. Like if I'm going to use RFS, I'll hit select. And now that's locked in. So it's only going to look for the radio frequency signal from the RFS 2.2 system, which I think is an amazing system. So I find there's not a lot of interference in there. And I think let's see. The last thing we're going to look at is the studio setup. This is where we set up our RFS 2.2 system for triggering and firing. This is basically the studio address is the term for what channel you want the packs to be on so that each pack will fire when you send the signal. So if my remote is set to Studio 1, which this is set to right here, and I have 3 packs all set to Studio 1, all 3 of those packs are going to fire when we fire our exposure. With tools like the Broncolor app, which you can get on your phone, which you can have an app on your computer, you can sync this pack and you can sync other Bron products to it. You can have individual access to power settings on each one of these channels. And to do that, you would maintain your studio address, but change the lamp address. So lamp 1, 2, or 3 on another pack, you set it up to Studio 1, lamp 4, 5, and 6, alternatively down the way. That way, using the app or even from the Broncolor remote, you've got some ability to change individual lighting or global lighting overall by up and downing on the remote or using the app. Also, this is, if you, Scoro makes this great meter. Oh, I hit the button. The 858D, and this actually has a transmitter in it that fires this. So while you're lighting, you can go around and you can fire the meter. It'll fire the packs so you can get settings based on that. You can even turn off, if you've got these dialed in, 1, 2, or 3, you can turn off individual heads. So if you just want to know what one light's doing, you can do that. Scoro, really great working with them with the RFS Studio. All right, as I said, you've got all the different lamp settings. You can change all those. And address display, this is where on our main menu, it'll say the studio address, which is handy if you do have all of your channels named, to make sure that you've got those visible so that you can quickly reference what you have set up. This is where I would say the pro tip on, especially when you have individually numbered channels. The pro tip here is, as an assistant, I like to keep a lot of paper tape and Sharpies in my kit. Super handy. This paper tape is wicked old. Oh, man. So what I would do for each lamp head, I would put a piece of tape on here, and then I would say, we know the studio is whatever we've set, so Studio 1, but I would say this would be lamp 1. It is a pulso head, and we have a P70 reflector on it. So now, which this is also handy for a couple different reasons, I know exactly what's on the end of this cable here. When you have multiple lights in multiple situations, you can get confused when your photographer says, hey, can you make sure that that paro over there, can you bring that down a stop? Now I can look, if I have one here that says paro, if you want to bring that pulso with the P70 down, you can do that. If you've added gel, you write that on here. So you have a visual representation of what you've got going on and the channel that the light's on. So if you're using your Broncontrol app, you can change those settings from a distance. The other thing to note, then this also makes it handy because you'll sometimes do this on set just for organization purposes. These are hot swappable. I can take this head off right now, modeling light on. It doesn't matter if I plug this in or if I plug this or unplug this. Broncolor packs are safe for hot swapping your lamp heads. One thing to note though is the previous setting that was in this channel will be saved in here. So right there it was 7.3 and right here is 7. So it'll maintain that. One thing to note is when you are using Broncolor products, I think it's very, 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 very important to know your power settings. Know what your power is doing and know what the ratings of the product that you're using's power is. This is a Pulso G that is a 1600 joule head. If I have a 3200 joule pack and I plug that in, I can still use it, but I don't want to go up to full power of 3200 joules with that head. It will not explode, but it'll greatly reduce the life of those flash tubes. And if you keep blowing flash tubes because you're putting too much power to them, you're actually costing yourself money. So using the right tools or the right power in the right products. This pack doesn't know that that's a 1600 joule head. It knows it has a plug in there. It will allow you to send the power to the head. So knowing what your output is and what the rating of the pack or what the rating of the instrument that you're using. Pulso, Pico lights are 1600 joules, but you can totally use them. You can use so many Bron products on any one of the packs, which is one of the great things, but just know your power. Which brings us to the last menu item that I want to talk about, and that is max display. And as I was saying, it's important to know what power is going to your lamp heads and what power is going to your lights. So, it's important to understand that. Broncolor uses joules representation of power, and that's essentially the same thing as watt seconds. A lot of folks will know that term. Hang on here, I'm getting a little gravelly. So max display is a tool for unifying the display of power across multiple packs. If I had a 3200 watt pack, Scoro pack here, a 10 power on a power represented by in 10 on a 3200 watt pack is 3200 joule pack is 3200 joules. On a 1600 pack, the power at 10 is 1600 joules. If you want to know how much power you're putting out to those heads and know that a 5 is, or a 9 is 800 joules, or, you want to have that unified across the two packs, that's where your max display comes in handy. This doesn't affect any of the power output or any of your settings. It's just how it's represented. If I'm working with two types of packs, 1600 and 3200, I want this pack to only show to its max power to show at 9. So I'm going to select 9. And I hit help, so I know what that is. Select. So now the max power, when I go all the way up, is going to show 9. That's 1600 joules represented as 9. And the reason why is 3200 joules is a whole stop more, and that's a 10, which would be on our 3200 watt pack. The other thing I like is with one of the settings, when I hit speed, it's going to show that I've lost that 0.4 of a stop in the relationship to from going from 1600 joules, hit speed mode, goes to 1200 joules to optimize it for flash duration. I like to know how much power, and I like to have that same idea represented on each pack. That's just something I enjoy. And if you're ever wondering how much power is going to each head, you can always jump into your menu and see right here, lamp, I've got 1213 joules going to that lamp head, which is a lot of power. If you take it down, it lets you know. And as you know, the inverse square law of, the one stop is twice the amount of power as the previous, and one stop down is half the amount of power as the previous. That is max display. And talked about that. All right. I talked about hot swapping the heads. All right. Proper usage. How's everybody doing? If you're doing well, let us know. I'm going to jump into talking about proper usage and storage of the packs here. But if there's any questions, just shout out. Blake, if we have any questions, let us know.
So far, so good on questions. We're ready to take things in for a landing. We definitely appreciate everybody sticking with us through this whole process today. So we will go ahead and we will cover the best tips and practices, and then we will be out until next time. So Galvin, go ahead and let's talk some best tips, and we'll circle back around and let everyone get on with their afternoon.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Best practices for storage. A lot of people have different ideas of how to store stuff. I personally enjoy something like this big Temba case, whether it's stored in a studio. I don't like leaving things out open on the shelf. I love having things in tough cases. In a tough case, I can instantly, quickly, if I need to add more stuff, throw it in there, but I can then go straight to the vehicle and go to a location. These packs are tough, but a tough case is essential. You can fly with these. This is a Temba Air case. Fantastic for travel and everything like that. Since I live in the Pacific Northwest, moisture reduction and moisture protection is it's half of the job, actually. So I enjoy these silica gel packets. Do not eat, but these are fantastic. You throw these in your cases. I have these in every camera bag, every case. It just absorbs the ambient moisture in a spot and keeps it from affecting your electronics. That's kind of a actual product of them, but you get these in so many products. So when I was a broke photo assistant, I would just, anytime that I got these, I would take them, and I had a Ziploc bag that I poked a bunch of holes in, and I just throw them in there and throw them into my equipment cases. Also, pro tip, if you don't want to spend money on these, go to a shoe store. They have boxes of these generally that they throw away. They're usually happy to get rid of them. If you find yourself working in a wet environment, the first thing that I always recommend with these packs is either hang them off the stand using a J-hook and a rope, or if you've got some apple boxes, put this on an apple box to keep it out of the, out of the rain, out of the moisture. Again, they're tough, but you do want to work hard to take care of them. Next up, working in the rain, I get these giant Ziploc bags. These are fantastic. This will fit the larger 3200 watt pack in it, as well as this. And the great thing is you can just put this right over the top of it, and it acts like a nice little tent. You can see through it, so you can still see your settings. You can push through it, so you can still make adjustments. And it's wide enough. You can see here, there's fan vents on the sides of the pack. And those fan vents, you want to keep clear. You want to make sure that those can still breathe. They still have airflow. So using something big like this will allow that to stay open, allow the air to flow. You can fold this up on the bottom to match the height of the 1600, so it can still let air come in and out, so you don't risk overheating inside of a bag. If you are out in the rain and you're working with your Pulso G heads, a great trick that really tickled me when I first found out about it is using turkey bags. A standard oven turkey bag is made to handle high heat. So as you rapid fire and use modeling lights, it won't melt this bag. And you can tape it to your modifiers to keep if you're using a P70, you could even use a rubber band to go around that. A little bit of tape will keep it on there. So you just cut a little hole in one side so you can get your mount out of there. But that's a great tip for keeping the head dry while you're working in a wet environment. I don't recommend working in absolute downpours, but we get a lot of spit and rain, or if you just are on a set and it might rain, it's always good to rig for moisture. Working in hot climates, sometimes you do a travel job, you end up out in the desert. I found that these really cheap thermal emergency blankets. You can get these for very cheap anywhere. You cut these down to a nice small size, and then you drape them over your pack. A little bit of tape will keep them from blowing away if you're in a windy environment, but the nice thing is these will reflect a lot of that ambient sunlight away. I always try to keep the sides open. Again, those fans are doing a lot of work, and especially in a hot environment, you want those to be able to vent that air. So keeping this to a size that allows that, and then taping it down. Good one note though is these are reflective. So sunlight can hit it and you can get pings on your subject. So where you place your pack next to your stand, or maybe get a flag to cover any of that, make sure you're not reflecting that light on set. But cheap Mylar blankets, if you find yourself in really hot conditions, they make more advanced thermal space blankets type of a thing. These have that shiny side inside there, and they have a little bit of insulation. So draping one of these over the top of there can be helpful, helps insulate against the heat. Again, let's jump back to wet weather. Shrink wrap is your friend. Say you're using you've got your household power or your power cable, taking your shrink wrap, wrapping it around here will keep it from moisture getting into that connection and causing any sort of short outs or faults in the pack. This can be used in a lot of places. I wouldn't use it on a head though, it will melt. But that is a handy tool. I think finally, if you're working with stuff where you're putting lights overhead, I want to bring this up because safety is always one of the most important things that I think we should work towards on set. Nobody should go home hurt, and we should work to be safe. If you're rigging lights or anything overhead or on stands, safety cables. These are just the cheapest way to keep people safe on set and not have things fall off or, that sort of thing. If you're working with a grid, a safety chain to the grid. If you're working with a boom arm, a safety chain to the boom arm, just to ensure that, any adjustments you make or, tighten, it doesn't loosen, wind blowing, just make sure that your equipment is tied down appropriately. And let's see, what else do I got? I think that's a good place to stop with the blitz at the end. Again, tough cases to keep things stored in. Work to protect stuff. Don't keep it out of the water, keep it out of the extreme heat. But you can still use them in those environments. Just take some precautions. I think that we kind of buckshotted through the end there.
Perfect. So we have a couple of questions here to finalize. First off, comments. Andrew and Tracy both say turkey bags. Great suggestion. And they will be using those moving forward. Adrian in the chat asks, how well do the Scoro packs work with gas-powered generators?
So again, you want to have a generator that's rated to handle the draw. I recommend jumping into the manuals to see the power draw. If you are shooting with a fast duration with a lot of power and in fast charging mode, it's going to draw a lot of power real fast. So making sure that you have a generator that is rated to handle that output. And I think these can get in those situations. You can, like a 3200 watt pack can draw up to 3200 amps. No. Yeah, I think it can at 240 draw up to that level of amps. So just making sure that your generator is rated for it. I have run a basic Scoro pack off a very small Honda 2000 watt, but I did set it up so that it wasn't going to draw a ton of power at one point. And I wasn't doing a shoot where I needed rapid fire or flash duration. So again, kind of like they'll work on compromised power grids, and sometimes generators can be compromised, but make sure they're grounded and, try to get the most, one with the most ability to power greatly. I mean, the more packs you use, one pack, one generator, you should be fine. Again, it all comes down to the ratings of the generators.
Okay.
And what you want to do with it.
Andrea in the chat asks, any recommendations for maxing the pack to lengthen the life of capacitors?
Maxing the pack to lengthen the life of capacitors. I might not fully understand exactly what you mean by that, but I do know that a pack that is worked regularly will last longer than a pack that sits idle a long time. So if you find yourself not shooting with a pack that you own regularly, or if you are a rental house and you aren't alternating which packs you're sending out, it's good to pull them out and just kind of run them through their paces at different times. But essentially, I mean, these packs are supposed to be able to work at full power or at low power anytime you're using them. So I'm sure I might be missing what the actual question is. If you can elaborate.
Okay. Andrea, in that case, Andrea, probably since we're running a little long on time, we will be presenting and posting our email address to you in your question there. Send us an email and we can definitely look into that for you.
It looks like she said we got it. Okay.
Hey, perfect. There we go. Next, we have from Eris. How reliable are the apps on the job? Have any experience working with them? I'm assuming we're talking the Broncolor app in this case.
Yeah. So I've had mostly good experience with the Broncolor app, but I had to learn a couple of tricks to make it a little bit more functional. If you are working with it, I do recommend working in airplane mode so that your phone only works is only working on that app. If you're bouncing around and being a power user productivity, I think the speed and connectivity will not be as useful as if you are using, I had an iPad mini at the time that I really worked with that a lot, and I would just have that on set, and I turned my power display or my power off so that the app was on all the time, and then I had it set to airplane mode so it would link up, and I would try to maintain a close distance. We were using the Scoro a lot when those came out and that app came out, and I think it's more robust now anyway. So I think there's a lot of better features than when we first used it a lot. It's been a little while since I've tested it. I do really want to take it for a spin because these packs have Wi-Fi on them now, and the two things I want to do is from my capture station, I want to be able to sit and be able to adjust some powers. So if I like where a light is while I'm doing, remote capture or sitting there, I'm not, I'll use Command K or whatever it is and Capture One to, fire my shots. I want to be able to jump into the app and adjust things minorly as I see them and want them. So I look forward to trying that out again. It's been a little while since I've used it, but for the most part, it's good. Yeah. I mean, it's the best tool for if you take a Scoro monolight on a boom above somebody or doing a backlight. I mean, you don't want to have to go get a ladder every time to make those changes. That Bron app is fantastic.
And one of our pro tips on this side, if you are using it on a phone or a tablet, make sure that you don't let that device go to sleep because that can cause some issues as well. I think unless we have any final questions that come up, I've got one last question here from John. Can you run the Scoro packs on battery packs?
So I've heard of people using those big Goal Zero packs. There are some really high output battery packs that exist on the market. I worked at a rental house prior to, doing this sort of thing. And we would see people would get those. We didn't have any of those solutions in our rental house, but people would go and buy those big Goal Zero high output camping batteries. And I've heard of people using those. At the point that you're using one of those, I would recommend looking at the Move Pack or the Scoro kits. You get so many fantastic features that are similar to this and work with this, and you have built-in batteries and the ability to charge those batteries off a large battery solution. So as far as hiking out to an extreme location with a big output battery and the 1600s are a reasonable size, but anything when you've hiked them 200 yards starts to be less reasonable. So looking at something like a Move Pack or a Scoro kit would be what I would look at before trying to drag a big battery out into the middle of nowhere. But then again, I don't know what your use case is or what you'd want, but all depends on the output rating of those battery packs. I think you'd blow through the power pretty quick using one of these.
Absolutely. I definitely think the Move Pack is probably the better better time on that. So we have gone well over our time today, and I definitely want to thank everybody for coming out and joining us today. I know we went a little bit long there, but hopefully it was exciting and informative as much as we can do on this case. Just want to remind everyone as well that next month, September the 29th, also a Wednesday, at 1 o'clock p.m., same bat time, same bat channel, that's Eastern time here in the U.S., we're going to be talking para-reflectors, do's and don'ts. So how to get the most out of your para-reflector, how to set them up, and how to make sure that your investment doesn't fall over while you're on set as well. So that being said, thank you once again for joining us, and everyone have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Yes, thank you so much for sticking around. It was a long one.